So Bronny James was just released from the hospital, and a lot of people and doctors have concluded that he most likely has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. But I think there's one thing that a lot of doctors are missing. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is a congenital disease, meaning that it is present at birth. So Bronny James would have been born with an already thick left ventricle.
But this is something that is congenital, meaning you have it from birth. It's not something that you acquire later on in life, but is the most common cause of sudden cardiac death in athletes.
And while I'm not doubting that it's hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, I think it's a specific condition within this disease that caused Bronny to have his cardiac arrest. More specifically, I want to look at athletes' hearts, which is a chronic hypertrophic cardiomyopathy due to excessive chronic exercise. The reason why this is so important is because it will affect the way you would treat Bronny James. Looking at it from the congenital heart disease standpoint, one of the options that you would do to treat Bronny James would be surgery, but that is very risky.
One of the treatments for this is to actually go in and do something called a myomectomy, where surgeons can actually remove this excessive amount of muscle in here to try and free up the space within the ventricle.
Now, this would obviously require heart surgery, which is a very, very dangerous surgery that could take Bronny out of commission or, if done wrong, would produce death. However, if we look at it from athlete's heart, it is a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is more so a problem of the capillaries that surround these myocytes. And so around every muscle tissue, especially in these cardiac muscle cells called myocytes, there's capillary loops that would surround the cells to bring oxygen through the blood so that the heart can actually contract and beat and be able to pump the blood out of the heart. In an athlete's heart, the muscle becomes so hypertrophied that the capillary loops don't completely surround the myocyte, and it loses the ability to regain all the oxygen it needs to actually do the work.
All of that muscle growth does not come with an increase in capillary density. And what I mean by that is, I don't know if I ever drew this little picture for you, but in a normal heart, this is a myocyte, they are essentially surrounded by capillaries. Okay? Every myocyte absolutely surrounded by capillaries. Okay? When they hypertrophy, that allows each one of these capillaries to essentially, each one of these circles is kind of the diffusion distance of oxygen. So you see that because all these capillaries are right next to each other, completely surround that myocyte, you're able to diffuse oxygen into that muscle very easily. But what happens when you have a giant myocyte, but you end up with the same number of capillaries around it? Now, even with their overlapping oxygen diffusion distances, the middle of that cell stays ischemic. The middle of that cell has very low oxygen, induces a lot of stress, okay? Kills that cell eventually. That's why I keep on harping on capillary density, why capillary density is so important.
Now, for most athletes, this isn't a problem because the rate of hypertrophy and the rate of the capillary density are pretty equaled out, so you still get enough capillary coverage and angiogenesis, which is creation of new capillaries, so that the myocytes are able to gain all the oxygen they need. However, somebody of Bronny's caliber, who's exercising, no doubt, every day, all the time, very intensely to live up to possibly his father's expectations and the expectations of the public, this is something that chronic over-exercising could certainly bring upon. And so looking at it just from the congenital heart disease standpoint of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, they might be doing heart surgery, or the second option would be to give beta blockers such as metoprolol. However, it's important to note that metoprolol does not improve maximum exercise capacity. So while it might be able to treat his hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, he wouldn't be able to compete at a high level in his athletics anymore. So it'd be something that he would be able to treat his heart so he wouldn't have another cardiac arrest soon, but he wouldn't be able to play basketball at a high level, especially at a D1 school like USC. Now, obviously, I'm not the one doing tests on Bronny, and I'm sure a lot of doctors are looking extensively, and especially given the amount of monetary funds that they're able to support Bronny with, I'm sure they're doing all and every single test that they possibly can. But I definitely think that capillary density should be something that these doctors are looking at for Bronny. And if it is a problem with the capillary densities, then a lot of the extreme measures that are taken, such as heart surgery and beta blockers for the rest of his life, are not necessarily needed. And it could possibly be treated with something like nitric oxide boosters that would open up the blood vessels and specifically the capillaries to support the oxygen flow to the myocytes so that it can contract. And so obviously there will be exercise routines and his intensity that might need to be lowered slightly, but it's not something that will be taken away, such as from metoprolol or even like heart surgery that will take him out of commission for years, possibly. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents thrown into the mix. I'm sure doctors are looking at all possibilities and supporting Bronny in his journey, but best of luck to him in a very unfortunate situation, especially if someone of his caliber and promise in the league.